I've always loved the quiet solitude of driving long stretches of highway at night. The roads feel endless, the world around me becomes a blur of darkness and distant headlights, and the peace is almost therapeutic. But one night, everything changed. I was on a solo road trip traveling through a remote stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where you can drive for hours without passing a single car. I had been driving for most of the day, and now it was well past midnight. On the steady hum of my camper van engine had started to make my eyelids heavy. The lines on the road blurred together, and my mind was starting to wander. I knew I shouldn't push it any further. I pulled over to the side of the highway, parked in a spot that seemed safe enough. And there were no signs for campgrounds or rest areas, but I figured I'd sleep in the van for the night and continue my journey in the morning. I didn't want to risk driving drowsy, so I threw the van into park, locked the doors, and settled in, drawing the curtains for some privacy. At first, it felt peaceful. Just me and the hum of the wind outside with the occasional whoosh of passing cars on the highway. I settled into the cushions, listening to the comforting sound of the engine's final hum fading into the night. But then, just as I was about to drift off, I heard something, a sound that didn't belong. A car. It wasn't the typical hum of a passing vehicle. This one slowed down as it neared my van and then stopped completely. I froze, my mind instantly on high alert. I glanced out the side window. No one was there, but I could hear the low rumble of the engine idling. It didn't make sense. I was in the middle of nowhere, and there wasn't a single place to pull off for miles in either direction. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone else stopping for a quick break, just like me, but then the engine shut off. Silence. I lay there, frozen in place, staring at the ceiling, trying to push the thoughts out of my mind. Maybe it was just another traveler needing a break, but deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. Something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I pulled the covers tighter around me and tried to stay as still as possible, hoping the sound of my breathing wouldn't give me away. Then, a knock on the door. The sound was sharp, unexpected, and came from the driver's side, right next to me. My heart jumped into my throat. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock, this time more forceful. "Hey, you in there?" A deep voice called out from outside. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to say. Who would be stopping out here at this hour in the middle of nowhere? I glanced out the rearview mirror. Nothing. The headlights of the other car were still off, and I couldn't make out any details. Or it felt like I was being watched, but there was no sign of anyone. I heard the faint shuffle of footsteps on the gravel, growing closer to the van. I reached for my phone, but the signal was gone. I could barely get a bar, and now it was nothing. My palms were slick with sweat. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to invite whatever was outside in. Then the voice came again, but this time it was closer. Much closer. "You all right in there?" I forced myself to steady my breath. I didn't answer. I just stayed as still as I could, praying whoever was outside would leave. But they didn't. The sound of a second set of footsteps joined the first. Two men now, one on each side of the van. "Why don't you come on out?" the first voice said, now muffled as if it was right next to my window. "We're not gonna hurt you. Just want to talk." I couldn't stop my body from trembling. I wanted to tell them to leave, to go away, but the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed, trapped inside this metal box, surrounded by the suffocating silence of the night. The second voice broke the stillness. "It's too late to be driving around. You should just get some rest." I didn't know if they were trying to sound reassuring or if they were trying to convince me they weren't a threat, but it felt more like a warning. Something wasn't right. They stood there for what felt like forever, not speaking, just circling my van like predators sizing up their prey. I tried to remain silent, but my mind raced with possibilities. What did they want? Were they waiting for me to open the door? What would happen if I did? I heard the sound of metal scraping against the gravel, the unmistakable sound of a large rock being lifted. Guess, guess she's not coming out, one of them muttered. The rock was tossed against the side of the van with a heavy thud. I jumped, the sound reverberating inside the small space. I couldn't breathe. I held my phone tightly, ready to call for help, but I knew I couldn't make a sound. If I did, it would only make things worse. For a moment, there was nothing but the silence of the night. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint hum of distant cars on the highway. I dared to peek through the side window, hoping to see the men leaving, but the headlights of their car were still off, the shadows too thick to make out any details. It was like they had never been there. I waited, every nerve in my body screaming for me to leave. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk them following me. My hands were shaking and my legs felt like jelly. I wanted to drive away, but I didn't want to make noise. I didn't want to draw attention. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the car engine roar back to life. The headlights flared on and the car slowly pulled away, disappearing into the dark. I held my breath until the sound of their tires faded completely. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move. I stayed locked inside, every part of me on high alert, my eyes glued to the windows. I didn't dare risk another encounter. By morning, they were gone. The campsite was quiet again, but the unease lingered. Something about those men, their voices, their presence, something about that whole situation didn't sit right with me. I don't know who they were or what they wanted. All I know is that when I finally drove away, I never stopped looking in my rearview mirror. And I'll never forget the feeling of being watched.